one of America's leading universities. On the campus of
more than 2 years to prove. I'm hoping that there is a problem on the main hallway chalk.
the most gifted mind to ever.
Took my colleagues and I. That's correct. We did this. You might prove it by the end of the semester.
Ever enter its classrooms.
I just need the...
Is the person who cleans its floors.
Parole officer.
The name of this guy who works in my building.
Got this job through his PO, you can call him.
PO.
Assault, theft, resisting.
Meet Will Hunting.
I've been looking over this rap sheet of yours.
Really? You have to meet with a therapist every week. I've spoken to the judge, and he's agreed to release you under my supervision.
For the first about to meet his match.
How many shrinks you go?
Time in his life. He's a
This boy's genius is on.
Go two before me.
5. Through to him.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm pumped.
Parallel. I need someone who can get through.
Let's let the healing begin. I don't know. This girl's like on a date last week. Going out again? I don't ruin that. Maybe you're beautiful. She's smart. She's fun. She's like perfect right now. Time to figure out what he wants. It's perfect right now. Maybe you don't want to ruin that. Have you talked to him at all about his future? Give him...
Boy has that gift. Can you imagine if Einstein
some people can never believe
would have given that up just to get drunk with his buddies every night?
even themselves.
I can't learn anything
Until someone believes
from you unless you want to talk about you.
in them. And some
You can do anything you want. You are bound by nothing.
You're sitting on a winning
never know how much they can have.
lottery ticket. I'd do anything to have what you...
Matt Damon, Ben Affleck,
I love you.
until they discover how much they can give. Stellan Skarsgård and Minnie Div. Academy Award winner Robin Williams.
What if the smartest mind in the room was hiding behind a janitor's mop? In Good Will Hunting, 1997, a troubled young genius from South Boston shocks the world when his hidden talent for mathematics is discovered. But his real battle isn't with numbers, it's with his painful past, fear of failure, and the walls he's built around his heart. In this video on Movies Explained Maz, we'll break down the powerful story, emotional moments, behind-the-scenes facts, and the life lessons that turned this film into a timeless classic. So stay tuned, because this movie is far more than just about being smart. Good Will Hunting is a 1997 American drama movie directed by Gus Van Sant and written by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. The film stars Robin Williams, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Stellan Skarsgård, and Minnie Driver, with Casey Affleck and Cole Hauser in supporting roles. The story takes place in Boston and follows Will Hunting, a troubled young man who works as a janitor at MIT but secretly has an incredible talent for mathematics that he learned on his own. His genius is discovered by Professor Gerald Lamb, who wants to help him reach his full potential. To stay out of jail, Will agrees to study under the professor and also attend therapy sessions with psychologist Sean McGuire. Through these sessions, Will is forced to face his painful past and deal with his emotions, as well as his growing relationship with a Harvard student named Skylar. The movie was released by Miramax Films and first premiered on December 2, 1997, before opening in theaters across the United States on December 5. Made with a budget of around $10 to $16 million, the film became a huge success and earned nearly $226 million worldwide. Good Will Hunting was highly praised by critics, especially for Robin Williams' powerful performance and the strong writing by Affleck and Damon. At the Academy Awards, the film received 9 nominations and won 2 major awards: Best Supporting Actor for Williams and Best Original Screenplay for Affleck and Damon. The soundtrack includes music by composer Danny Elfman along with songs by singer Elliott Smith, including the emotional track Miss Misery, which was nominated for an Oscar. After being released on parole, Will Hunting, a rebellious 20-year-old who taught himself advanced mathematics, works as a janitor at MIT in South Boston. He spends most of his free time hanging out and drinking with his close friends Chucky, Billy, and Morgan. One day at work, Will secretly solves a very difficult math problem that Professor Gerald Lamb had written on a hallway blackboard as a challenge for his graduate students. Not long after, Will and his friends get into a fight with a local gang that includes one of Will's old childhood bullies. When the police arrive, Will is arrested for attacking an officer. To test the unknown genius who solved the first problem, Lamb posts an even harder one. He later catches Will writing the solution but thinks he is damaging the board and chases him away, only to realize moments later that Will was actually solving it. That same night at a bar, Will meets Skylar, a smart Harvard student who is about to graduate and plans to go to Stanford for medical school, and the two quickly connect. Lamb searches for Will and learns from the maintenance staff that he did not return to work. He soon finds out that Will was placed at MIT through a parole program and tracks down his parole officer. At Will's court hearing, Lamb watches as Will confidently tries to defend himself. Lamb then steps in and arranges a deal to keep Will out of jail, but only if he studies mathematics under Lamb's guidance and attends regular therapy sessions. Will agrees, but he treats each therapist with sarcasm and disrespect. Running out of options, Lamb contacts his old college friend Dr. Sean McGuire, a psychology professor at Bunker Hill Community College. Unlike the other therapists, Sean does not back down from Will's attitude. In their first meeting, Sean nearly attacks Will after Will insults his late wife. In later sessions, Sean slowly pushes Will to open up about his emotions and past. Will even encourages Sean to move forward from his grief. During this time, Will begins dating Skylar, but he lies about his life and background. Sean shares the story of how he first met his wife in a bar and instantly fell in love, choosing to skip a famous baseball game just to talk to her, saying he had to see about a girl. He explains that despite all the struggles they later faced, he never regretted that choice. Inspired, Will introduces Skylar to his friends. Meanwhile, Lamb sets up several high-profile job interviews for Will, but Will treats them with contempt. He especially rejects a job at the NSA, criticizing the agency's ethics and the harm it could cause. When Skylar asks Will to move to California with her, he refuses out of fear. She confronts him for pushing people away, and Will finally reveals that he grew up in foster care and suffered physical abuse as a child. Overwhelmed, Will breaks up with her. He also lashes out at Lamb, mocking his research and efforts to control his future. Sean later confronts Will about his deep fear of being abandoned and failing in life, urging him to be honest about what he truly wants. Around the same time, Chucky gives Will a powerful talk, saying that the best part of his day is hoping Will won't answer the door one morning because he has finally left to build a better life for himself. Will overhears Sean and Lamb arguing about him, with Sean accusing Lamb of pushing Will too hard and possibly destroying his future. After Lamb leaves, Sean opens up about his own childhood abuse, helping Will feel less alone. Sean repeatedly tells Will, "It's not your fault," until Will finally breaks down and cries, accepting that the pain he suffered was not his responsibility. Will eventually accepts one of the job offers Lamb arranged. Sean and Lamb make peace with each other, and Sean decides to take time off to travel and heal. For Will's birthday, his friends give him a car to help him commute to work. But when Chucky goes to pick him up, he happily realizes Will is gone. Will has left a note for Sean, asking him to tell Lamb that he had to go see about a girl, as he heads off to find Skylar and start a new chapter of his life. Good Will Hunting unfolds in the working-class neighborhoods of South Boston, where the protagonist, Will Hunting, a 20-year-old orphan, navigates a life marked by intellectual brilliance and emotional turmoil. Will works as a janitor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, spending his days mopping floors and his nights drinking with his close-knit group of friends, Chucky Sullivan, Billy McBride, and Morgan Emily. These friends represent the blue-collar world Will inhabits, engaging in construction work, bar fights, and simple pleasures like watching Little League games. Unbeknownst to most, Will possesses an extraordinary genius for mathematics, self-taught through voracious reading of advanced texts in history, science, and literature. The story ignites when Professor Gerald Lamb, a renowned Fields Medal-winning mathematician at MIT, posts a challenging problem on a hallway blackboard intended for his graduate students. The problem involves finding the number of three-step walks in a graph based on its adjacency matrix. Will solves it anonymously while cleaning, astonishing Lamb and his assistant Tom. Intrigued, Lamb posts a second, more difficult problem concerning the enumeration of homeomorphically irreducible trees on 10 nodes, a reference to a theorem by George P. A. Cubed liar. Will begins solving this 1-2 but is interrupted and mistaken for a vandal. After a chase, Lamb realizes Will's talent and tracks him down through the maintenance supervisor. Will's life takes a turn when he assaults a police officer during a street brawl with a childhood bully and his gang. Facing jail time, Will represents himself in court, citing obscure legal precedents to argue his case, but he is convicted. Lamb intervenes, arranging a deal. Will avoids prison if he studies mathematics under Lamb's supervision and attends weekly therapy sessions. This setup introduces the central conflict to Will's resistance to confronting his past. He cycles through several therapists, mocking them with intellectual superiority and fabricated stories, until Lamb enlists his old college roommate, Dr. Sean McGuire, a psychology professor at Bunker Hill Community College and a fellow South Boston native. Sean's sessions with Will form the emotional core of the film. In their first meeting, Will analyzes a painting in Sean's office, deducing personal details about Sean's life, including the loss of his wife to cancer. Sean reacts strongly, warning Will against such intrusions. Over time, Sean shares his own vulnerabilities, his abusive alcoholic father, his decision to skip Game 6 of the 1975 World Series to pursue his future wife Nancy, and the joy and pain of their marriage. These revelations chip away at Will's defenses. A pivotal moment occurs when Sean repeatedly tells Will, "It's not your fault," referring to the physical and emotional abuse Will suffered in foster homes. Will initially resists, but eventually breaks down in tears, embracing Sean in a cathartic release. Parallel to the therapy arc is Will's romance with Skylar, a British primed student at Harvard inheriting a fortune. They meet in a bar where Will humiliates a pompous Harvard graduate student, Clark, by outwitting him intellectually. Skylar is drawn to Will's raw intelligence and humor, but their relationship strains under Will's lies about his family. He claims to have 12 brothers to hide his orphan status. When Skylar invites him to join her at Stanford for medical school, Will panics, revealing his abusive past and accusing her of eventual abandonment. They part ways amid heartbreak. Will's friendships provide grounding contrast. Chucky, his best friend, delivers a raw monologue urging Will not to waste his potential, admitting he'd trade places with him in a heartbeat. For Will's 21st birthday, the friends gift him a beat-up Chevrolet Nova, symbolizing their support. Lamb pushes Will toward high-profile jobs, including at the NSA, which Will sabotages with a satirical rejection letter criticizing government overreach. Ultimately, inspired by Sean, Will chooses self-determination. He leaves a note for Sean quoting his World Series story "I got to see about a girl" and drives west to reconcile with Skylar, leaving Boston behind. The narrative weaves these threads through montages of Boston's urban landscape, bar scenes, and intellectual duels, building to Will's transformation from a defensive genius to someone open to vulnerability and growth. Character analysis. Will Hunting, portrayed by Matt Damon, embodies the archetype of the tortured genius. Orphaned and abused in foster care, Will's intellect serves as both a shield and a weapon. He devours books on economics, law, and history, quoting them effortlessly to dominate conversations, yet he sabotages opportunities out of fear of failure or abandonment. His eidetic memory and problem-solving prowess highlight his potential, but his street-smart bravado masks deep-seated trauma. Will's arc is one of reluctant self-acceptance, catalyzed by relationships that force introspection. Dr. Sean McGuire, played by Robin Williams, is Will's foil and mentor. A widow haunted by his wife's death from cancer, Sean shares Will's Southie roots, making him uniquely equipped to penetrate Will's defenses. Sean's philosophy emphasizes lived experience over book knowledge, as seen in his famous monologue about Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel. "You'd probably give me the skinny on every art book ever written, but I'll bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel." This underscores Sean's belief in emotional authenticity. His vulnerability at admitting regrets and joys are models the healing Will needs. Chucky Sullivan, Ben Affleck's character, represents unwavering loyalty and working-class realism. As Will's construction worker best friend, Chucky pushes Will toward greatness, not out of envy, but genuine love. His speech, "I'd do anything to have what you got. It'd be an insult to us if you're still here in 20 years," reveals the class constraints binding their group, highlighting themes of social mobility. Chucky's humor and toughness provide comic relief, but his depth shines in moments of tough love. Professor Gerald Lamb, portrayed by Stellan Skarsgård, symbolizes institutional ambition. A brilliant but arrogant mathematician, Lamb sees Will as a copyright to revive his own stagnating career. His insistence on structure clashes with Will's chaos, exposing Lamb's insecurities, his fear of being overshadowed. Lamb's arc involves humility, learning from Sean's empathetic approach. Skylar, played by Minnie Driver, adds romantic tension. As a privileged Harvard student, she challenges Will's cynicism with optimism and affection. Her inheritance contrasts Will's poverty, amplifying class divides. Skylar's persistence in loving Will despite his walls humanizes her, making their breakup poignant. Supporting characters like Billy and Morgan add levity, while cameos, for example, George Plimpton as a therapist, enrich the ensemble. Each character serves to dismantle Will's isolation, illustrating how interpersonal connections foster personal evolution. Themes and symbolism. Good Will Hunting delves profoundly into themes of identity, trauma, and redemption. Central is the exploration of genius versus emotional intelligence. Will's intellectual gifts isolate him, as he uses knowledge to deflect intimacy. The film critiques how society valorizes raw talent without addressing underlying pain, symbolized by the blackboard problems of abstract puzzles Will solves easily, yet real-life problems elude him. Class disparity permeates the narrative, contrasting South Boston's grit with Cambridge's elitism. Symbols like the L Street Tavern and Harvard bars represent cultural divides. Will's rejection of NSA jobs critiques institutional exploitation of the underclass, echoing anti-establishment sentiments. Religion subtly influences, with Catholic undertones in Southeast community and Protestant associations with Harvard, highlighting ethnic tensions in Boston. Trauma and healing are depicted through therapy sessions, emphasizing vulnerability. Sean's "It's Not Your Fault" scene symbolizes breaking cycles of abuse. Friendship as a redemptive force is evident in Chucky's monologue, symbolizing selfless love. Love and abandonment fears drive Will's romance with Skylar, with the car gift symbolizing mobility, a literal and metaphorical escape from stagnation. Symbolism abounds. The public garden bench represents catharsis and memorial. Post William's death, it became a real-life tribute. The highway ending symbolizes open futures, while baseball references, for example, 1975 World Series, evoke missed opportunities and choices. The film uses Boston's geography, Charles River, Turnpike as metaphors for barriers and crossings. Mental health stigma is challenged, portraying therapy as transformative rather than weakness. Self-sabotage versus self-worth underscores Will's journey, with education symbolizing not just knowledge but empowerment. Production history. The genesis of Good Will Hunting traces to Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's friendship in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Damon started the script as a 40-page assignment for a Harvard playwriting class in 1992. Inspired by his father's janitorial work at Harvard and their own blue-collar experiences, Affleck joined, infusing it with South Boston authenticity from his background. Initially a thriller about a physics prodigy pursued by the FBI, it evolved after feedback to focus on psychology and relationships. In 1994, The script sold to Castle Rock Entertainment for $600,000, but creative differences arose. Rob Reiner advised removing the action subplot, emphasizing drama. William Goldman provided uncredited input, refining dialogue. When Castle Rock stalled on directing choices, the project entered turnaround. Kevin Smith, after reading it, urged Harvey Weinstein at Miramax to buy it for $1 million in 1996. Miramax's acquisition enabled revisions, with Goldman suggesting the therapy focus. Directorial candidates included Michael Mann and Mel Gibson, but Affleck and Damon favored Gus Van Sant for his indie sensibility, seen in To Die For. Van Sant was hired after Robin Williams expressed interest, drawn to the script's emotional depth. Budgeted at $16 million, filming began April 14, 1997, spanning 9 weeks. Locations included Toronto for interiors, the University of Toronto standing in for MIT, and Boston for exteriors, MIT, Harvard Square, Public Garden, L Street, Devon. Van Sant encouraged improvisation, like Williams' ad-libs, fostering authenticity. Post-production involved editor Pietro Scalia, who preserved rhythmic dialogue. Math consultants like Daniel Klitman ensured accuracy. The soundtrack, blending Danny Elfman's score with Elliott Smith's folk songs, was composed collaboratively. Miss Misery was written specifically after Smith viewed Rush's. Miramax's marketing positioned it as an Oscar contender, premiering December 2, 1997, in Los Angeles. Challenges included dialect coaching for non-Bostonians and navigating Boston's weather, but the production's emphasis on realism paid off. Casting and performances. Casting blended emerging talents with veterans. Matt Damon, then relatively unknown, embodied Will with raw intensity, drawing from personal experiences. Ben Affleck, his co-writer, brought charisma to Chucky, improvising lines for humor. Robin Williams was cast as Sean after reading the script. His performance, mixing comedy and pathos, earned acclaim for its nuance. Williams' improvisations, like the farting wife story, added levity. Minnie Driver secured Skylar after auditions, beating out others like Ashley Judd. Her chemistry with Damon felt genuine, enhanced by their real-life romance during filming. Stellan Skarsgård Yen Rhodes Lamb conveyed intellectual arrogance with subtlety. Casey Affleck, Morgan, and Cole Hauser, Billy, rounded out the friends, with Affleck's natural Boston accent adding authenticity. Cameos included George Plimpton and Francesco Clementi as therapists, and Harmony Korine in a small role. Performances were lauded, Damon's vulnerability in breakdown scenes, Williams' restraint earning an Oscar, Affleck's supportive yet forceful presence. Driver's nomination highlighted her emotional range. The ensemble's chemistry, fostered by rehearsals, made interactions believable. Direction and cinematography. Gus Van Sant's direction infuses the film with intimate realism, using long takes to capture unfiltered emotions. His indie background from films like My Own Private Idaho influenced the naturalistic style, emphasizing character over plot. Van Sant allowed actor input, leading to iconic improvisations. Cinematographer Gene Evers-Coyer's work contrasts Boston's gritty streets with academia's polished halls. Warm lighting in therapy scenes evokes intimacy, while cool tones in MIT sequences symbolize detachment. Montages of Will's commutes across the Charles River Bridge symbolize transitions. Handheld camera in fights adds dynamism, while static shots in dialogues heighten tension. The aspect ratio, 1.85 to 1, and Dolby Digital sound enhance immersion. Van Sant's subtle symbolism, like recurring benches and highways, reinforces themes without overtness. Music and soundtrack. Danny Elfman's orchestral score provides emotional underscoring, with minimalist motifs during therapy and uplifting swells in resolutions. Elliott Smith's indie folk songs, including Between the Bars and Angeles, mirror Will's introspection. Miss Misery, nominated for an Oscar, plays over the credits, encapsulating melancholy hope. Other tracks like The Waterboys' Fisherman's Blues and Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street evoke nostalgia. The soundtrack's blend of score and songs amplifies themes, with Smith's music gaining posthumous significance. Reception and awards. Upon release, Good Will Hunting grossed $225.9 million worldwide against a $10.16 million budget, opening to $272,912 in limited theaters and peaking at $14.8 million in wide release. Critically, it holds 97% on Rotten Tomatoes and 71/100ths on Metacritic. Roger Ebert praised its emotional moments, while Janet Maslin called it smart and touching. Some critiqued predictability, but performances were universally acclaimed. At the 70th Academy Awards, it won Best Supporting Actor, Williams, and Best Original Screenplay, Affleck and Damon, the youngest winners at 25 and 27. Nominations included Best Picture, Director, Actor, Damon, Supporting Actress, Driver, Editing, Score, and Song. Other accolades: Golden Globes for Screenplay, SAG for Williams, Critics' Choice for Screenplay. Cultural impact and legacy. Good Will Hunting launched Damon and Affleck's careers, inspiring plays like Matt Ben. It boosted Elliott Smith's visibility, with Miss Misery performed at the Oscars. The film influenced therapy portrayals in media, destigmatizing mental health. Rumors of Goldman's involvement sparked screenwriting debates. In Boston, it romanticized Southie, with the Public Garden bench becoming a Williams memorial after his 2014 death. Its legacy endures in discussions of class and trauma, remaining a Netflix staple in 2025. No sequel materialized, preserving its standalone impact. Analysis of key scenes. The bar confrontation with Clark exemplifies class warfare. Will's "How do you like them apples?" quip, after securing Skylar's number, symbolizes triumph over pretension. Sean's "Your move, Chief," after his experience monologue, challenges Will's arrogance, highlighting knowledge versus wisdom. Chucky's porch speech reveals fraternal bonds, urging potential realization. The breakdown "Oh, it's not your fault" is cathartic, using repetition for emotional breakthrough. The ending, Highway Drive, with Smith's music, symbolizes liberation. Good Will Hunting, 1997 film. Production, development and pre-production. The genesis of Good Will Hunting represents one of Hollywood's most remarkable stories of perseverance and friendship. The screenplay originated from an unlikely source, a college assignment that would eventually transform into an Academy Award-winning film and launch two of the most successful careers in modern cinema. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's friendship began in their hometown of Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they met at a young age. Their shared passion for acting and filmmaking would eventually culminate in their collaborative work on Good Will Hunting. The screenplay's origins trace back to Damon's fifth year at Harvard University, where he was taking a playwriting class. The final assignment required students to write a one-act play, but Damon had different ideas. Instead of following the assignment parameters, he began crafting what would become the foundation of Good Will Hunting, turning in approximately 40 pages of screenplay rather than the requested one-act play. Damon later acknowledged to the professor that he might have failed the class requirements but believed he had created the first act of something more substantial. The only scene from that original 40-page submission that survived verbatim into the final film was the first meeting between Will and Sean, the psychologist character that would eventually be portrayed by Robin Williams. This scene would become one of the film's most powerful moments, establishing the complex therapeutic relationship at the heart of the story. After leaving Harvard at just 12 credits shy of completing his degree to pursue a role in the 1993 film Geronimo, An American Legend, Damon moved to Los Angeles and reunited with Affleck. He brought the incomplete screenplay with him and asked for Affleck's assistance in developing it further. This marked the beginning of their screenwriting partnership, though Damon and Affleck have both acknowledged that their writing process was far from efficient. In later interviews, Damon admitted they wrote thousands of pages without fully understanding screenplay structure. They would conceive of different scenarios and write disparate scenes without initially considering how they would fit together cohesively. The pair would ask themselves hypothetical questions about the characters and write scenes based on those possibilities, eventually attempting to assemble these fragments into a coherent narrative. The original concept for Good Will Hunting was markedly different from the final product. The screenplay initially contained substantial thriller elements, including a subplot involving Will being recruited by the US government for intelligence work. This version positioned the story as more of an action thriller hybrid, with government intrigue playing a significant role in the narrative. The script was considerably longer and more complex, incorporating chase sequences and espionage elements that would have fundamentally altered the film's character. Damon and Affleck completed their first full version of the screenplay in 1994. The script was initially purchased by Castle Rock Entertainment, the production company run by Rob Reiner, for $675,000. This sale represented a significant achievement for the young writers, validating their efforts and providing them with their first major success in the industry. However, the journey from sale to production would prove to be fraught with challenges and obstacles. During Castle Rock's development of the project, Reiner himself became involved in shaping the screenplay. His most significant contribution was advising Affleck and Damon to eliminate the government thriller subplot entirely and instead focus on the relationships between the characters, particularly the dynamic between Will and his therapist. This proved to be transformative advice that fundamentally reshaped the screenplay into the character-driven drama it would become. Additionally, legendary screenwriter William Goldman was brought in for consultation. Goldman's involvement later became the subject of persistent rumors suggesting he had substantially rewritten or even ghostwritten the screenplay, claims that Goldman himself repeatedly and emphatically denied in interviews and in his 2000 memoir Which Lie Did I Tell? Goldman confirmed that his contribution was minimal, essentially reinforcing Reiner's advice to focus on character relationships rather than thriller elements. He spent approximately one day with Affleck and Damon, providing guidance on structure and focus, but the screenplay remained fundamentally their work. The advice from both Reiner and Goldman proved invaluable. Affleck and Damon undertook a substantial overhaul of the script, removing the government conspiracy and espionage elements and concentrating on Will's personal journey, his relationships with his friends, his romantic involvement with Skylar, and his therapeutic sessions with Sean. This revision transformed the screenplay from a genre hybrid into an intimate character study. The film also received narrative guidance from director Terrence Malick, who suggested that the film should conclude with Will driving to California to follow Skylar, which became the final film's ending. The path to production became significantly more complicated when Castle Rock decided on director Andrew Zimmern for the project. Affleck and Damon disagreed with this choice, believing Zimmern was too obscure and not the right creative partner for their vision. This disagreement led Castle Rock to put the film into turnaround, a process where the studio offers to sell the project to another company. However, Castle Rock attached challenging conditions. Affleck and Damon had 30 days to find another studio willing to purchase Good Will Hunting for $1 million. If they failed to meet this deadline, Castle Rock would proceed with production but would remove Affleck and Damon from the project entirely, replacing them with a different creative team. This ultimatum created enormous pressure on the young writers. They returned to the studios they had previously approached, only to encounter significant rejection. Multiple studio executives scheduled meetings specifically to inform Affleck and Damon that they would not purchase the screenplay. The experience was demoralizing, with one meeting at Interscope Communications being particularly memorably found. Ted Field's dismissive approach to the material later inspired Affleck to write a scene in his 2012 directorial effort Argo. Despite the setbacks, Affleck and Damon remained persistent. Studio executives at various companies wanted to cast more established stars in the lead role, suggesting actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt for Will Hunting. However, Damon was inspired by Sylvester Stallone's famous story of refusing to sell the Rocky screenplay unless he could star in it himself. This precedent gave Damon the resolve to hold firm on his requirement to play Will Hunting, even as studios pushed back against casting an unknown actor in the lead role. At this critical juncture, Affleck turned to director Kevin Smith, with whom he had recently worked on the 1995 film Mallrats. Affleck asked Smith if he would be interested in directing Good Will Hunting and potentially bringing it to Miramax Films, where Smith had a relationship. Smith, after reading the screenplay, told Affleck that he wouldn't dare direct such a beautiful script, believing it was beyond his capabilities. However, he recognized the screenplay's quality and brought it to the attention of Harvey Weinstein, the founder of Miramax Films. This connection proved pivotal, as Smith later stated that he was the reason Good Will Hunting got made, noting that all other offers had evaporated and they were dead in the water. Weinstein responded positively to the screenplay, recognizing its potential. However, he also demonstrated that he had read it thoroughly by asking Affleck and Damon to remove two specific elements: scenes depicting Will playing chess and scenes showing sexual content involving Will and Sean. By identifying these specific scenes for removal, Weinstein proved to the writers that he had actually read the entire script to a concern given the previous rejections. Affleck and Damon had actually employed a deliberate trick in their screenplay to test which studios were genuinely reading the material. On page 60 of the script, they had included a scene that was completely out of character and tonally inconsistent with the rest of their screenplay, from a genre hybrid into an intimate character study. The film also received narrative guidance from director Terrence Malick, who suggested that the film should conclude with Will driving to California to follow Skylar, which became the final film's ending. The path to production became significantly more complicated when Castle Rock decided on director Andrew Zimmern for the project. Affleck and Damon disagreed with this choice, believing Zimmern was too obscure and not the right creative partner for their vision. This disagreement led Castle Rock to put the film into turnaround, a process where the studio offers to sell the project to another company. However, Castle Rock attached challenging conditions. Affleck and Damon had 30 days to find another studio willing to purchase Good Will Hunting for $1 million. If they failed to meet this deadline, Castle Rock would proceed with production but would remove Affleck and Damon from the project entirely, replacing them with a different creative team. This ultimatum created enormous pressure on the young writers. They returned to the studios they had previously approached, only to encounter significant rejection. Multiple studio executives scheduled meetings specifically to inform Affleck and Damon that they would not purchase the screenplay. The experience was demoralizing, with one meeting at Interscope Communications being particularly memorably found at Hetfield's dismissive approach to the material later inspired Affleck to write a scene in his 2012 directorial effort Argo. Despite the setbacks, Affleck and Damon remained persistent. Studio executives at various companies wanted to cast more established stars in the lead role, suggesting actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt for Will Hunting. However, Damon was inspired by Sylvester Stallone's famous story of refusing to sell the Rocky screenplay unless he could star in it himself. This precedent gave Damon the resolve to hold firm on his requirement to play Will Hunting, even as studios pushed back against casting an unknown actor in the lead role. At this critical juncture, Affleck turned to director Kevin Smith, with whom he had recently worked on the 1995 film Mallrats. Affleck asked Smith if he would be interested in directing Good Will Hunting and potentially bringing it to Miramax Films, where Smith had a relationship. Smith, after reading the screenplay, told Affleck that he wouldn't dare direct such a beautiful script, believing it was beyond his capabilities. However, he recognized the screenplay's quality and brought it to the attention of Harvey Weinstein, the founder of Miramax Films. This connection proved pivotal, as Smith later stated that he was the reason Good Will Hunting got made, noting that all other offers had evaporated and they were dead in the water. Weinstein responded positively to the screenplay, recognizing its potential. However, he also demonstrated that he had read it thoroughly by asking Affleck and Damon to remove two specific elements: scenes depicting Will playing chess and scenes showing sexual content involving Will and Sean. By identifying these specific scenes for removal, Weinstein proved to the writers that he had actually read the entire script to a concern given the previous rejections. Affleck and Damon had actually employed a deliberate trick in their screenplay to test which studios were genuinely reading the material. On page 60 of the script, they had included a scene that was completely out of character and tonally inconsistent with the rest of the screenplay. When Miramax was the only studio to specifically mention this problematic scene, it confirmed that Weinstein and his team had actually studied the screenplay carefully rather than making a blind offer. This attention to detail convinced Affleck and Damon that Miramax was the right home for their project. Miramax purchased the screenplay for $600,000 and agreed to two crucial conditions that other studios had resisted. The film would be shot on location in Boston, maintaining the authentic setting that was integral to the story, and Matt Damon would star in the lead role. These agreements reflected Miramax's understanding that the Boston setting was essential to the story's authenticity and character. Affleck and Damon were both passionate about filming in their hometown, having grown up in the Cambridge area and understanding the specific cultural dynamics of South Boston working-class life versus Harvard and MIT academic culture. Affleck was particularly vocal about the importance of filming locally, explaining that so much of what they wanted to accomplish was presenting Boston the way they knew it. From growing up there, capturing everything from the dialect to the specific kinds of culture and the way people lived. After acquiring the project, Miramax initially struggled to find the right director. One early candidate was Mel Gibson, who developed the project for several months. However, as time passed, Damon became concerned about aging out of the role. He approached Gibson directly, explaining that if development continued much longer, both he and Affleck would become too old to play their characters convincingly. Gibson understood the concern and graciously released the project, allowing Miramax to pursue other directorial options. The search for a director eventually led to Gus Van Sant, who had established himself as a talented independent filmmaker with works like Drugstore Cowboy and My Own Private Idaho. Van Sant had previously collaborated with composer Danny Elfman on the 1995 film To Die For, and the two had developed a strong working relationship. When Van Sant read the Good Will Hunting screenplay, he called it probably the best written screenplay I had ever read and described it as a color-by-numbers script. If you just filled in the scenes as they were written, it would come to life. Van Sant immediately contacted Affleck and Damon and agreed to direct the film, explaining that he was drawn to the project because you just don't find that a lot all in one screenplay. With Van Sant attached as director, the production moved into active development. However, the project still needed a significant element to ensure financing: a recognizable star. Affleck and Damon had strategically written the role of Sean McGuire, the therapist, as a substantial supporting part that could attract an established actor. They were specifically influenced by the production story of Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, which secured financing after Harvey Keitel committed to the project. Affleck and Damon understood that having a movie star attached would greatly enhance their chances of getting the film produced. Robin Williams emerged as the ideal candidate for Sean McGuire. At the time, Williams was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, typically commanding approximately $20 million per film. However, the production's limited budget made such a salary impossible. After contract negotiations, Williams agreed to star in Good Will Hunting for $5 million, a significant discount from his usual rate. The production team celebrated what they thought was a favorable deal, but Williams had negotiated an escalating participation agreement. If the film grossed more than $60 million, he would begin receiving additional compensation based on the film's performance. This deal structure would prove extremely lucrative for Williams when the film became a massive commercial success. Williams' interest in the project was sparked by Francis Ford Coppola, with whom he had worked on the 1996 film Jack. Coppola told Williams about the screenplay, and Van Sant subsequently sent him the script. Williams was immediately drawn to the material and the character of Sean Maguire. His attachment to the project proved instrumental in finally securing the production's financing. As Damon later explained, his casting in Francis Ford Coppola's 1997 adaptation of John Grisham's The Rainmaker gave Weinstein confidence in Damon's potential as a leading man, but it was Williams' interest and eventual casting that were truly pivotal to getting Good Will Hunting made. After approximately a year of development following Miramax's acquisition, Weinstein assigned producer Lawrence Bender to the film. Bender had previously produced Tarantino's films and brought significant experience to the project. With Bender attached, Van Sant's director fee approved, and Williams committed to the role, production financing was finally secured and the film moved into pre-production. The casting process continued with the search for actress to play Skylar, Will's love interest. Van Sant, Affleck, and Damon all favored Minnie Driver for the role, having been impressed by her work. However, Harvey Weinstein disagreed with this choice. According to Driver, Weinstein sent a note to the casting director stating that nobody would want to fuck Driver, which left her devastated and worried that she might not be hired for misogynistic reasons. Weinstein denied Driver's specific claim regarding the note but confirmed that he had initially wanted to cast Ashley Judd in the role. Despite Weinstein's objections, Driver was ultimately cast, and her performance would become one of the film's highlights, earning her an Academy Award nomination for the Best Supporting Actress. For the role of Professor Gerald Lamb, the production cast Swedish actor Stellan Skarsgård Yenrode. Skarsgård received the script while filming Steven Spielberg's 1997 film Amistad and immediately accepted the role, drawn to the screenplay's quality and the opportunity to work with Van Sant. An interesting casting situation arose regarding Casey Affleck, Ben's younger brother. The production team had written the role of Morgan specifically for Casey, and he frequently spent time with the team during development. Everyone assumed Casey would play the part. However, Casey initially refused the role because he wanted to focus on creating a documentary about the film's production. Eventually, he changed his mind and accepted the part, appearing in Good Will Hunting while also working on his documentary project. Pre-production also involved extensive location scouting. Although much of the film would ultimately be shot in Toronto for budgetary reasons, the production team initially scouted locations in Toronto but quickly realized that certain scenes needed to be filmed in actual Boston locations to capture the city's authentic character and atmosphere. The decision to shoot partially in Boston and partially in Toronto represented a compromise between artistic authenticity and financial practicality. One of the technical aspects that required attention during pre-production was ensuring the mathematical accuracy of the problems and dialogue featured in the film. The original concept had Will as a physics genius, but at the suggestion of Harvard professor and Nobel Prize-winning physicist Sheldon Glashow, the character was changed to a mathematics genius instead. Glashow's brother-in-law, Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor Daniel Klitman, worked directly with Damon and Affleck to ensure that all mathematical dialogue would be authentic and accurate. Klitman brought in MIT postdoctoral researcher Tom Bachman to help develop the specific mathematical problems that would appear in the film, as Klitman found it challenging to simply improvise mathematical dialogue. They worked together in MIT's old mathematics lounge to create problems and equations that would appear both genuine to mathematicians and impressive to general audiences. The production budget was set between $10 million and $16 million, a modest amount that reflected Miramax's position as an independent studio. This budget constraint influenced many production decisions, including the choice to film partially in Toronto where production costs were lower than in Boston. Despite these financial limitations, the production team was committed to creating a film that felt authentic and well-crafted. As pre-production concluded in early 1997, all the pieces were finally in place. Van Sant had assembled his cast, the screenplay had been refined through years of development and revision, locations had been scouted, and the production schedule had been established. After years of struggle, rejection, and persistence, Good Will Hunting was ready to begin filming. Filming principal photography for Good Will Hunting commenced on April 14, 1997, and concluded 9 weeks later in June 1997. The production was split between authentic Boston locations and various sites in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, reflecting both the filmmaker's commitment to authenticity and the budgetary realities of independent film production. Gus Van Sant's directorial approach proved instrumental in capturing the intimate, naturalistic performances that would become one of the film's defining characteristics. Rather than adopting a controlling directorial style, Van Sant gave his actors significant freedom to explore their characters and develop authentic moments. His process included extensive rehearsals with the cast, finding inconspicuous camera placements that wouldn't interfere with performances, and shooting long takes that allowed scenes to unfold organically. Van Sant deliberately avoided interfering with actors during takes, preferring to create an environment where moment-to-moment honesty could emerge naturally. This approach suited the different working styles of his cast members. Matt Damon often needed just one take to deliver a satisfactory performance, feeling confident in his preparation and instincts. Ben Affleck preferred to try scenes multiple times, exploring different interpretations before settling on the best version. Robin Williams, drawing on his extensive theatrical background, typically needed a minimum of 7 takes to feel satisfied with his work, wanting to have multiple versions of each scene that emphasized different emotional shadings and interpretations. Van Sant accommodated all these different approaches, creating a collaborative environment that brought out the best in each performer. Affleck and Damon, despite being the screenwriters, consciously decided to focus primarily on their acting during production rather than attempting to maintain creative control over every aspect. They trusted Van Sant to develop the narrative through his directorial choices and concentrated on delivering authentic performances. This decision reflected their respect for Van Sant's vision and their understanding that trying to maintain complete control might hinder the creative process. Damon later commented that Van Sant's approach nurtured his acting process, while Stellan Skarsgård appreciated that the director gave the actors space to grow. Williams found working with Van Sant easy, particularly appreciating that the director stayed present in scenes with actors rather than remaining distant behind monitors. The Boston locations were carefully chosen to capture the authentic character of the city and the specific neighborhoods that the story required. Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge served as the primary academic setting, with the exterior of MIT's McLaurin building representing the college where Will works as a janitor. These scenes were crucial for establishing the contrast between Will's working-class background and the prestigious academic environment where his genius is discovered. For Professor Lamb's office and various academic scenes, the production utilized Bunker Hill Community College in Charlestown, Boston. The College of Sean McGuire, the therapist played by Robin Williams, was filmed at this location, providing an authentic community college atmosphere that contrasted with MIT's prestige. One of the most iconic locations from the film is the bench in Boston Public Garden where Sean takes Will for their pivotal heart-to-heart conversation. This scene, featuring Williams' character sharing vulnerable memories about his late wife, became one of the film's most emotionally resonant moments. The bench is located on the lakeside path, the third bench north from the western end of the bridge, and it remains a pilgrimage site for fans of the film. After Williams' death in 2014, the bench became an informal memorial where admirers left flowers, notes, and tributes. The working-class bar where Will and his friends spent time is Woody's L Street Tavern, located at 658 East 8th Street in South Boston. The establishment proudly displays a sign outside announcing its role in the Oscar-winning film. The exterior has undergone some renovation since 1997, but the location remains recognizable and continues to serve as a gathering place for the South Boston community. Local residents praised the film's depiction of their neighborhood, appreciating that the clothing, accents, behavior, and even the cars driven by characters felt authentic to their community. Dozens of South Boston residents were cast as extras, contributing to the film's genuine atmosphere. Other Boston locations included various streets in the Dorchester neighborhood, where scenes of Will and his friends navigating their South Boston working-class environment were filmed. The Massachusetts Turnpike was used for the film's final scene, showing Will driving westward toward California to reunite with Skylar, though the exact location of this shot has been subject to some debate among film enthusiasts. Harvard University also featured in the production, with Dunster House serving as the exterior for Skylar's dormitory. The scenes of Will visiting Skylar at her Harvard residence emphasized the class divide between the two characters, a Will from working-class South Boston and Skylar from a privileged background attending one of the world's most prestigious universities. Due to budgetary constraints, a substantial portion of the film was shot in Toronto, Ontario. The University of Toronto provided numerous interior locations, standing in for both MIT and Harvard in various scenes. Specific buildings utilized included Knox College, Whitney Hall, St. Michael's College, McLennan Hall, Victoria College, and the Faculty Club. Whitney Hall's exterior was used as Skylar's apartment building, while interiors were shot at nearby Wycliffe College. The McLennan Physical Laboratories building was used for Professor Lamb's MIT Lecture Hall, with its distinctive architecture providing an appropriately academic atmosphere. The Central Technical High School in Toronto provided additional interior spaces for academic scenes. The University of Toronto locations were chosen because they offered architectural gravitas and could convincingly double for prestigious American institutions while being more affordable than filming entirely in Boston and Cambridge. Toronto also provided several commercial and public locations. The Ontario Specialty Co., located at 133 Church Street at Queen Street, served as the toy store where Will demonstrates a magic trick to impress Skylar. This building was later transformed into a beauty parlor for the fake newsreel shots in the Oscar-winning musical Chicago, which was filmed entirely in Toronto. The Crown Life building at 120 Bloor Street East represented the glossy corporate environment that Will ultimately rejects, symbolizing his resistance to conventional career paths. The Upfront Bar and Grill, located at 106 Front Street East in downtown Toronto, provided the interior for the Harvard College bar scene where Will humiliates an arrogant history student who is trying to impress Skylar. This scene became one of the film's most memorable moments, showcasing Will's photographic memory and intellectual abilities while also demonstrating his insecurity and need to prove himself. The scene concludes with Will obtaining Skylar's phone number and delivering his famous line to the humiliated student. "How do you like them apples?" Both the Ontario Specialty Company and the Upfront Bar and Grill are no longer in business, having closed in the years following the film's production. The decision to film partially in Toronto generated some controversy, as Affleck and Damon had been passionate advocates for filming entirely in Boston. However, the financial realities of independent film production necessitated this compromise. The Toronto locations were carefully selected to match Boston's architectural character, and the editing skillfully integrated the two cities' footage. Most viewers remain unaware that significant portions of the film were shot in Toronto rather than Boston. Van Sant's cinematographer, Jeannie Viscoya, employed Panavision cameras and lenses to capture the film's visual aesthetic. The cinematography emphasized naturalism and authenticity, avoiding flashy techniques in favor of a grounded, realistic visual approach. Viscoya utilized natural lighting where possible and chose framing that emphasized characters and their interactions rather than calling attention to the camera work itself. The film's color palette was somewhat subdued, reflecting both the working-class Boston environment and the introspective nature of the story. The production occasionally faced challenges related to the compressed shooting schedule and modest budget. However, Van Sant's efficient directorial approach and the cast's professionalism helped keep the production on track. The 9-week shooting schedule was tight but manageable, and the production wrapped on time without significant complications. One interesting production detail involves the blackboard equations that appear in the film. Damon based these on a story from his artist brother Kyle, who had visited MIT's Infinite Corridor and written an incredibly elaborate, totally fake version of an equation on a blackboard, which remained there for months without anyone questioning its authenticity. This anecdote inspired the film's use of blackboard equations as a plot device, with the main hallway blackboard being used twice to reveal Will's talent, first to the audience and then to Professor Lamb. The intimate scenes between Will and Sean required particular attention during filming. These therapy sessions formed the emotional core of the film, and Williams and Damon worked carefully to build authentic chemistry and emotional progression across these scenes. Williams' extensive experience in dramatic roles served him well, allowing him to balance Sean's humor with his underlying pain and wisdom. The famous "It's Not Your Fault" scene, where Sean finally breaks through Will's defensive walls, required multiple takes to capture the precise emotional build that Van Sant sought. The romantic scenes between Damon and Driver benefited from genuine chemistry, as the two actors developed a real-life romantic relationship during filming. This authentic connection translated to the screen, making Will and Skylar's relationship feel natural and believable despite the relatively compressed timeline of their courtship in the script. Filming in spring 1997 in Boston and Toronto meant dealing with variable weather conditions, but this seasonal timing worked well for the story, which spans a similar period. The production design, led by Melissa Stewart, emphasized authenticity in every detail, from the working-class apartments where Will and his friends lived to the academic offices of MIT and the community college where Sean works. As filming concluded in June 1997, Van Sant and his team had captured all the material needed to tell the story. The production had successfully navigated the challenges of a modest budget, multiple locations, and a tight schedule. The raw footage would now move into post-production, where editor Pietro Scalia would assemble the final film from the many hours of material captured during those 9 weeks in Boston and Toronto. Post-production following the conclusion of principal photography in June 1997, Good Will Hunting entered post-production under the guidance of editor Pietro Scalia, who would later receive an Academy Award nomination for his work on the film. The post-production process proved crucial in shaping the raw footage into the emotionally resonant and tightly paced drama that would captivate audiences and critics. Scalia, working with director Gus Van Sant, faced the challenge of assembling a film that maintained narrative momentum while honoring the intimate, character-driven nature of the story. The editing process involved balancing the various story threads, Will's mathematical genius and academic opportunities, his therapeutic journey with Sean, his romance with Skylar, and his loyalty to his working-class friends. Each of these elements required careful attention to pacing and emotional development. Van Sant had incorporated Elliott Smith's music into his creative vision from the early stages of production. During filming, Van Sant asked Scalia to begin integrating Smith's existing songs into the rough cuts of the film. This unusual approach to incorporating music during the editing process rather than adding it later helped establish the film's melancholic, introspective tone and influenced editing decisions throughout post-production. Smith's folk-inflected indie rock provided a perfect sonic accompaniment to the film's themes of working-class struggle, emotional vulnerability, and personal growth. The editing process required particular finesse in the therapy scenes between Will and Sean. These extended dialogue sequences needed to maintain dramatic tension while allowing the emotional progression to unfold naturally. Scalia carefully selected takes and paced these scenes to create a sense of building intimacy and trust between the characters. The famous "It's Not Your Fault" scene went through multiple iterations in the editing room, with Scalia and Van Sant working to find the precise rhythm that would allow the emotional breakthrough to land with maximum impact. Similarly, the romantic scenes between Will and Skylar required delicate editing to establish their relationship's progression from initial attraction through deepening connection to ultimate crisis when Will's fear of vulnerability threatens to destroy what they've built. The editing had to convey both the excitement of new love and the underlying tension created by Will's emotional damage and fear of intimacy. The film's humor also required careful editorial attention. The scenes with Will's friends, particularly the interplay between Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's characters, balanced humor with authenticity. The editing preserved the natural rhythms of the friends' conversations and banter, allowing their genuine affection and loyalty to come through while maintaining comedic timing. One of the key editorial decisions involved the film's structure and pacing. The screenplay included numerous scenes, and Scalia had to determine which moments were essential to the narrative and which could be trimmed or removed entirely. This process of refinement helped create a film that felt both complete and economical, without unnecessary scenes that might slow the narrative momentum. The visual transitions between scenes also required thoughtful consideration. Van Sant and Scalia employed various techniques to move between the different locations and story threads. Some scenes flowed directly into one another, while others used music to bridge transitions. The editing maintained a consistent visual language throughout the film while allowing for variety in pacing and tone across different sequences. Post-production also involved color correction and grading, processes that helped establish the film's visual character. The somewhat subdued color palette emphasized the realism of the Boston setting while avoiding any visual flourishes that might distract from the character-driven story. The cinematography's natural lighting was preserved and enhanced in the grading process, maintaining the film's grounded, authentic visual aesthetic. Sound design and mixing formed another crucial component of post-production. While Good Will Hunting is primarily a dialogue-driven film, the sound design created atmospheric depth through ambient sounds of Boston neighborhoods, academic buildings, and the various locations where scenes unfold. The sound mix ensured that dialogue remained clear and intelligible while incorporating these environmental sounds and the musical score. During post-production, Gus Van Sant had pitched an idea that would have dramatically altered the film's ending. He suggested that Chucky, Will's best friend played by Ben Affleck, should die in a construction accident. This proposal would have fundamentally changed the emotional tone of the film's conclusion. Affleck and Damon were not enthusiastic about this idea but agreed to write scenes incorporating Chucky's death so Van Sant could see how it would work. However, after reading the revised ending, Van Sant realized that this dramatic alteration was indeed a mistake and abandoned the idea. The film retained its more helpful ending, with Chucky discovering that Will has left Boston to pursue his relationship with Skylar and his future, a moment of joy for the friend who has always wanted better opportunities for Will. The final assembly of the film came together over several months, with Van Sant, Scalia, and the producers reviewing multiple cuts and making refinements. The editing process typically involves several stages. The assembly cut, which represents a first pass at putting scenes together in sequence. Rough cuts, where major structural decisions are made. Fine cuts, where pacing and rhythm are refined. And finally the locked cut, which represents the finished film before final technical processes. Throughout this process, test screenings played a crucial role in gathering audience feedback and identifying areas where the film might not be connecting with viewers as intended. However, the post-production period for Good Will Hunting was relatively smooth, without major structural overhauls or reshoots being necessary. The strong screenplay and solid performances captured during production provided excellent material to work within the editing room. The final runtime of Good Will Hunting came in at 126 minutes, 2 hours and 6 minutes. A length that felt appropriate for the story's scope without becoming indulgent. The pacing allowed scenes to breathe and emotional moments to resonate while maintaining forward momentum throughout the narrative. The technical quality of the post-production work contributed significantly to the film's success. The editing received recognition through Pietro Scalia's Academy Award nomination for Best Film Editing, acknowledging his contribution to shaping the raw footage into a coherent and emotionally powerful film. While Scalia didn't win the Oscar, losing to Titanic, his work on Good Will Hunting represented a significant achievement in editing for character-driven drama. As post-production concluded in late 1997, the finished film was ready for its premiere and theatrical release. The months of work in the editing room, sound studios, and color grading suites had transformed the material captured during those 9 weeks of shooting into a polished, professional film that would soon exceed all expectations for its commercial and critical performance. Music. The musical landscape of Good Will Hunting represents a collaboration between two distinct but complementary artists, film composer Danny Elfman, who created the orchestral score, and singer-songwriter Elliott Smith, whose melancholic indie rock songs provided the film's emotional foundation. This dual musical approach proved integral to the film's success, earning Academy Award nominations for both Elfman's score and Smith's original song Miss Misery. Gus Van Sant's relationship with music in Good Will Hunting began during his work on the 1995 film To Die For, which marked his first collaboration with Danny Elfman. That partnership established a creative rapport between director and composer that would extend to Good Will Hunting and several subsequent Van Sant films. For To Die For, Van Sant had initially sought raw musical sounds and even considered using heavy metal, but he had also discovered the music of Elliott Smith during this period. After completing To Die For, Van Sant began listening more extensively to Smith's music and recognized that it would be a better match for Good Will Hunting than heavy metal or other alternatives he had considered. Van Sant discussed this musical direction with producer Lawrence Bender during pre-production and decided to film with Smith's music in mind. He instructed editor Pietro Scalia to begin incorporating Smith's songs while editing, an unconventional approach that influenced the film's rhythm and emotional tone during the editing process itself. Meanwhile, Van Sant met with Danny Elfman in Boston to discuss the score and ask for his opinion on the overall musical direction. Elfman approved of Van Sant's concept and began writing orchestral music specifically designed to complement Smith's songs rather than compete with them. This collaborative approach was unusual, as film scores and source music are typically developed independently of one another. Elfman's willingness to create music that would blend seamlessly with Smith's work demonstrated both his versatility as a composer and his understanding of the film's needs. Towards the end of the editing process, Van Sant contacted Elliott Smith through mutual friends to request permission to use his music in the film. Smith agreed to watch the film, and the experience moved him to write an original song specifically for Good Will Hunting, Miss Misery. This composition would become closely associated with the film and earn Smith an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Elfman, Smith, and Van Sant then collaborated to finish the complete musical soundtrack, carefully blending Smith's songs with Elfman's orchestral pieces. Elfman provided the orchestral arrangement for Smith's song Between the Bars, which appeared in the film, and later rearranged Miss Misery for Smith's live performances at various award shows, including the 70th Academy Awards ceremony. Elfman later recalled this collaboration as the best experience he had working on music with an artist, adding that after 110 films, or whatever, it's been one of the only 2 times I feel I collaborated with anybody. Danny Elfman's orchestral score for Good Will Hunting represented a departure from his more famous work on Tim Burton's films and other projects that showcased his gothic, fantastical compositional style. For Good Will Hunting, Elfman created a more subdued, intimate sound that emphasized acoustic guitar, piano, a smaller string ensemble, woodwinds, and light choral effects. The score occasionally incorporated Irish-sounding musical elements that connected to Boston's Irish-American cultural heritage and the characters' backgrounds. The music featured minimalistic thematic variations that mirrored Will Hunting's own search for purpose and direction in life. Rather than employing bold, memorable themes, Elfman's score worked atmospherically, supporting emotional moments without overwhelming them. The compositions ranged from the main title through various cues like Genie, Mopper, First Calculation, Theorem, Mystery Math, The Mappils, Jail, and Time's Up, to the end credits piece previously known as Weepy Donuts. This approach represented a more intellectual and emotionally distant compositional style compared to some of Elfman's other work, but it served the film perfectly. The score has been compared to James Horner's later work on A Beautiful Mind, another film about mathematical genius. The Elfman's approach for Good Will Hunting emphasized intellectual restraint where Horner's score would emphasize emotion more directly. Elliott Smith's contribution to the soundtrack proved equally crucial. Smith was a Portland-based indie rock artist with a growing cult following but limited mainstream recognition before Good Will Hunting. His music featured introspective, confessional lyrics delivered in a soft, intimate vocal style over acoustic guitar-based arrangements. Songs like Angeles, No Name No. 3, Between the Bars, and the Oscar-nominated Miss Misery captured themes of loneliness, addiction, emotional damage, and the struggle for connection, all deeply relevant to Will Hunting's character and journey. Smith's music provided sonic representation of Will's internal emotional landscape in ways that dialogue and visual storytelling alone could not achieve. The songs appeared during key transitional moments and montages, helping to establish the film's melancholic but ultimately hopeful tone. Smith's aesthetic are intimate, vulnerable, and authentic, aligned perfectly with the film's examination of emotional openness and the difficulty of breaking down defensive walls. The original soundtrack album was released by Capitol Records on November 18, 1997, though it represented an incomplete picture of the film's musical content. The album heavily favored Elliott Smith's contributions, including several of his songs from the film, while only including two of Danny Elfman's cues. This commercial decision disappointed fans of Elfman's work and created demand for a more complete release of the score. For many years, the only way to experience more of Elfman's score was through a rare Academy Awards promotional CD that Miramax distributed to Academy members for Oscar consideration. This promotional disc contained selected highlights from the score along with Smith's Miss Misery, but it was never commercially available and became a sought-after collector's item, occasionally appearing on eBay and similar platforms for inflated prices. This situation persisted until 2014, when Music Box Records finally released the complete score by Danny Elfman. This release included 45 minutes of music, Elfman's complete orchestral score paired with Elliott Smith's songs as they appeared in the film. The album came with a 12-page booklet featuring liner notes by Daniel Schweiger. This comprehensive release allowed audiences to fully appreciate Elfman's contribution to the film for the first time, filling what had been a significant gap in his discography. In 2017, further attention came to Elfman's score when Enjoy the Ride Records released the music on vinyl for the first time. This release featured 21 tracks pressed at 45 RPM for optimal sound quality, housed in a single LP jacket with various limited edition colored vinyl variants. The vinyl release demonstrated continued interest in the film's music 2 decades after its original release. At the 70th Academy Awards, both musical contributions received recognition. Danny Elfman earned his first Oscar nomination for the Best Original Dramatic Score, while Elliott Smith received a nomination for the Best Original Song for Miss Misery. Both ultimately lost to James Horner's My Heart Will Go On and the score for Titanic, which dominated the ceremony. However, the nominations themselves represented significant achievements and brought substantial attention to both artists. For Elliott Smith, the Academy Award nomination and subsequent performance at the Oscars brought major exposure to a much wider audience than his indie rock fanbase. His label, Kill Rock Stars, was able to pay off debts following Smith's rise in popularity. However, Smith himself struggled with the sudden fame, finding it uncomfortable and shying away from public attention. He would release 2 more albums after Good Will Hunting before his tragic death in 2003 at the age of 34. His music has continued to be featured on soundtracks for film and television posthumously, and Good Will Hunting remains his most famous association with cinema. The soundtrack also included other artists' contributions beyond Elfman and Smith. The Starland vocal band's Afternoon Delight appeared in the film during a scene but was not included on the soundtrack album. Various classical and traditional Irish pieces also appeared, contributing to the film's sonic texture and its connection to Boston's Irish-American cultural heritage. The musical choices throughout Good Will Hunting demonstrated how effectively music can support and enhance storytelling. Neither Elfman's score nor Smith's songs dominated the film. Instead, they worked in service of the narrative, underscoring emotional moments, bridging scenes, and providing insight into characters' internal states. The music became inseparable from the film's identity, with many viewers associating Elliott Smith's melancholic sound with the story even decades after the film's release. The collaboration between Elfman, Smith, and Van Sant represented an ideal integration of musical elements in cinema. The orchestral score provided emotional underscoring and atmospheric depth, while the source music offered cultural authenticity and emotional resonance. Together, these elements created a rich sonic landscape that elevated the film beyond what it might have achieved with either approach alone. Release: theatrical Good Will Hunting premiered on December 2, 1997, at the Bruin Theatre in Westwood Village, Los Angeles. This premiere marked the culmination of years of struggle for Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who attended the event having transformed from struggling actors into screenwriters on the verge of major success. The premiere generated positive buzz, with early reactions suggesting that Miramax had a significant film on their hands. The theatrical release strategy for Good Will Hunting followed the pattern typical of prestige independent films seeking awards recognition. A limited release in major markets followed by gradual expansion based on audience response and critical reception. In the United States, the film received its initial limited release on December 5, 1997, opening in just 7 theaters across New York and Los Angeles. This limited opening grossed $272,912 during its first weekend, representing a strong per-theater average that indicated genuine audience interest beyond the typical curiosity that might greet a new release. The limited release strategy allowed the film to build word-of-mouth momentum while positioning it for awards consideration. Miramax, under Harvey Weinstein's leadership, had become renowned in the industry for aggressive marketing campaigns designed to secure Academy Award nominations and wins as a strategy to promote independent films to wider audiences. At the 69th Academy Awards in 1997, the studio had garnered 20 nominations for its 1996 productions, including 12 for The English Patient. This success established a blueprint that Miramax would employ for Good Will Hunting. Following its limited opening, Good Will Hunting expanded gradually. By its 4th weekend of release, the film was playing in 157 theaters and grossed $1,720,540. This gradual expansion allowed the film to maintain strong per-theater averages while building awareness through critical reviews and audience recommendations. The strategy proved effective as the film continued to perform well in its limited theatrical footprint. After conducting a test screening that scored the highest among all films Miramax had ever produced, Harvey Weinstein made the strategic decision to move up the film's wide release to December, positioning it 1 week before James Cameron's Titanic. This timing placed Good Will Hunting in theaters during the crucial holiday season and allowed it to establish itself before the juggernaut that would be Titanic dominated the box office. 2 weeks after its limited opening, Good Will Hunting received its wide release across 1,787 theaters. The wide opening weekend grossed $14,844,684, finishing as the number 2 film of the week behind Titanic. This strong opening demonstrated that the film had successfully transitioned from limited art house success to mainstream appeal, connecting with audiences beyond the typical demographic for independent drama. The film maintained remarkable staying power in subsequent weeks. In its 8th week of release, Good Will Hunting grossed $11,218,707 and ranked as the number 3 film of the week behind Titanic and Spice World. By the following week, the film had earned over $60 million in total domestic gross, a significant milestone for an independent production with a modest budget. The announcement of Academy Award nominations provided another boost to the film's box office performance. In the week following the announcement that Good Will Hunting had received 9 Oscar nominations, the film earned $11,075,873, a 23.8% increase from the previous week. The film finished as the number 4 film of that week behind Titanic and 2 new releases, The Wedding Singer and Sphere. This post-nomination bump demonstrated the commercial value of awards recognition and validated Miramax's strategy of positioning the film for Oscar consideration. Good Will Hunting spent 13 consecutive weeks among the top 10 highest-grossing films, an extraordinary run that testified to its broad appeal and positive word of mouth. The film successfully served as counter-programming to Titanic and other big-budget releases, offering audiences a more intimate, character-driven alternative to spectacle-driven entertainment. However, the film's theatrical run eventually faced a premature conclusion due to business calculations. Miramax had reached a point where it became more financially advantageous to release the film on home video rather than continue paying for theatrical advertising and distribution. Harvey Weinstein asked Matt Damon to convince Robin Williams to renegotiate his deal so the film could remain in theaters longer, with the goal of reaching a total domestic gross of $150 million. When Damon refused this request, Weinstein and Miramax first scaled back the number of theaters showing the film before ultimately pulling it from theatrical release entirely. Good Will Hunting left theaters in its 33rd week of release, having grossed $138.4 million domestically against its production budget of $16 million. Including international revenue, the worldwide gross reached $225.9 million. In the United States, the film surpassed Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, 1994, as Miramax's most successful theatrical release ever and became the 7th highest-grossing film of 1997. Director Curtis Hanson contextualized Good Will Hunting's success as part of a commercial and critical resurgence of character-driven narratives, alongside 1997 films As Good as It Gets and The Full Monty. Industry insiders and experts had predicted that 1997 would be dominated by major studio productions, but the unexpected success of Good Will Hunting and other independent films demonstrated the continued commercial and critical viability of independent cinema. The film was widely recognized as a successful example of counter-programming, having thrived despite being released nearly simultaneously with Titanic, which became one of the highest-grossing films of all time. The international release strategy varied by territory, with Miramax International handling overseas sales and distribution. The film performed well in international markets, contributing approximately $87.5 million to the worldwide gross. Different territories had different release dates, with some countries receiving the film in early 1998 rather than December 1997. The film's commercial success far exceeded initial expectations. On a production budget of $16 million, grossing $225.9 million represented an extraordinary return on investment. This financial performance validated every aspect of the production: Affleck and Damon's insistence on maintaining creative control, Miramax's willingness to film partially in Boston despite higher costs, and the decision to cast relative unknowns in lead roles alongside Robin Williams. The box office success also vindicated Robin Williams' decision to work for a reduced upfront salary in exchange for back-end participation. His deal structure meant that as the film crossed the $60 million threshold and continued to gross multiples of that amount, his total compensation eventually far exceeded what a flat $20 million fee would have provided. For Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Gus Van Sant, the film's success also translated into financial rewards beyond the initial payments. All three had negotiated profit participation. Van Sant received 2.5% of the adjusted gross, while Affleck and Damon received percentages of the net profit. Given the film's extraordinary commercial performance, These back-end deals provided substantial compensation. The theatrical release of Good Will Hunting represented a masterclass in independent film distribution and marketing. Miramax's strategy of limited release, gradual expansion, awards positioning, and strategic timing created maximum commercial and critical impact for a modestly budgeted character drama. The film's success would influence distribution strategies for independent films for years to come, demonstrating that character-driven dramas could compete commercially with big-budget spectacles if properly marketed and positioned. Home media. Following its successful theatrical run, Good Will Hunting transitioned to home media, where it would continue to find audiences and generate revenue for decades. The home video release strategy reflected the evolving technology and distribution methods of the late 1990s and subsequent years. The film was initially released on VHS and DVD in 1998, shortly after concluding its theatrical run. This timing was typical for successful films of the era, with studios seeking to capitalize on theatrical buzz and awards recognition. The home video release was handled by Disney, Buena Vista, as Miramax was a subsidiary of Disney at the time. The initial DVD release featured a 1.85:1 aspect ratio transfer and Dolby Digital 5.1 audio, representing the standard home video quality available in the late 1990s. In 1998, Miramax also released a collector's edition DVD that included several special features beyond the film itself. This edition contained a production featurette running approximately 6 minutes and 39 seconds, featuring interviews with Minnie Driver, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Robin Williams, and Gus Van Sant discussing the film, interspersed with clips and behind-the-scenes footage. The theatrical trailer was included, presented in an unmatted 1.33:1 aspect ratio. Additionally, the disc featured an Academy Awards Best Picture montage, the music video for Elliott Smith's Miss Misery, running 3 minutes and 17 seconds, and behind-the-scenes footage presented as a montage, 3 minutes and 36 seconds. While these features were relatively modest by later standards, they represented typical special edition content for the late 1990s home video market. The film remained available in these formats through the 2000s, with periodic re-releases as DVD technology improved and high-definition formats emerged. The transition to Blu-ray represented the next significant development in the film's home media history. Lionsgate acquired distribution rights for Good Will Hunting and released the first Blu-ray edition on August 30, 2011. This release marked a significant upgrade in video and audio quality, presenting the film in 1080p high definition with a 1.85:1 aspect ratio and DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 sound. The visual transfer was faithful to the film's original theatrical presentation, with a slightly subdued color palette, noticeable but not distracting film grain, good detail, and deep blacks that avoided crushing. The Blu-ray ported over most of the special features from their previous Buena Vista, Disney DVD releases, all presented in standard definition, 480p. Additionally, the 2011 Blu-ray included a digital copy on a separate DVD-ROM disc, containing portable versions of the film in both iTunes and Windows Media formats. Reviews of the 2011 Blu-ray release were generally positive, with critics noting that while the transfer wasn't perfect, it represented the best the film had looked on home video and was a substantial improvement over previous DVD releases. The DTS HD Master Audio's soundtrack effectively served the dialogue-driven film, with clear and intelligible dialogue. Danny Elfman's score and the film's songs spread nicely across the 5 channels, and ambient and atmospheric effects utilizing the surround and LFE tracks in a subtle but effective manner. On August 21, 2012, Lionsgate released a 15th anniversary edition Blu-ray. This edition featured the same video and audio transfer as the 2011 release but added new special features commemorating the film's 15th anniversary. The new retrospective special feature provided substantial additional content and proved well worth watching for fans of the film. However, unlike the 2011 release, The 15th anniversary edition did not include a digital copy. The disc came in a standard Blu-ray keepcase with a slipcover. The 15th anniversary edition retained all the special features from the 2011 release while adding the new retrospective content in high definition, 1080p. This double-dip release strategy issuing a new edition with additional features approximately 1 year after the initial Blu-ray followed a common pattern in the home video industry, where studios release multiple editions to maximize revenue from catalog titles. On September 22, 2020, another Blu-ray edition was released, continuing the film's availability in high-definition format. This release maintained the established transfer quality while potentially adjusting packaging and supplemental materials. The 2020 release ensured that the film remained readily available in physical media format even as the industry increasingly shifted toward digital and streaming distribution. Throughout these various home media releases, Good Will Hunting maintained consistent pricing that reflected its status as a popular catalog title. The film typically retailed for moderate prices, making it accessible to general audiences while occasionally appearing in bargain pricing that encouraged new viewers to discover the film. International home media releases followed different patterns depending on regional distributors and market conditions. The United Kingdom saw releases from various distributors over the years, including a 2015 Blu-ray edition. Other territories received the film through region-specific distributors, with release dates and special features varying by market. The special features across various editions provided valuable context and behind-the-scenes information, though fans of the film and particularly fans of Danny Elfman's score noted that the home media releases never included comprehensive audio commentaries or extensive making-of documentaries. The relatively modest supplemental materials reflected both the film's independent production origins and the fact that extensive documentation of the production process may not have been captured during filming. The home video releases of Good Will Hunting also made the film accessible for educational purposes. The screenplay became a standard text in many screenwriting courses, and the availability of the film on home media allowed students and educators to study the work closely. The film's examination of class, genius, trauma, and therapy made it relevant for courses in psychology, sociology, and cultural studies beyond its use in film programs. As streaming services emerged and gained prominence in the 2010s and 2020s, Good Will Hunting became available on various digital platforms. The film appeared on services including Amazon Prime Video, both with ads and ad-free, Google Play Movies, Apple TV, YouTube, Fandango at Home, and Canopy. This digital availability ensured that the film remained accessible to audiences even as physical media declined in popularity. The transition to digital distribution allowed for new monetization strategies, with the film available for rental, purchase, or streaming as part of subscription packages. The flexibility of digital distribution meant that viewers could access the film across multiple devices and platforms, adapting to changing consumption habits while ensuring that Good Will Hunting remained part of the cultural conversation decades after its original release. The various home media releases demonstrated the film's enduring popularity and commercial viability. Each new format and edition found an audience, whether from existing fans upgrading their collections or new viewers discovering the film for the first time. The consistent availability across formats from VHS through DVD, Blu-ray, and digital streaming ensured that Good Will Hunting remained accessible to successive generations of viewers, cementing its status as a modern classic of American cinema. Reception box office. Good Will Hunting's commercial performance exceeded all expectations, transforming from a modestly budgeted independent film into one of 1997's biggest success stories. The financial achievement validated the creative decisions made throughout the production process and demonstrated the commercial viability of character-driven drama in an era often dominated by big-budget spectacle. The film's production budget ranged between $10 million and $16 million depending on the source. a modest amount that reflected Miramax's position as an independent studio and the limitations inherent in financing a film from unknown screenwriters with a first-time leading man. This budget covered the costs of the 9-week shooting schedule split between Boston and Toronto, the cast and crew salaries, including Robin Williams' $5 million fee plus back-end participation, and all post-production expenses. Against this modest investment, Good Will Hunting generated extraordinary returns. The domestic theatrical gross reached $138,433,435, representing a remarkable 813 times return on the production budget, depending on which budget figure is cited. The international theatrical gross added approximately $87,500,000, bringing the worldwide total to $225,933,435. This worldwide performance represented one of the most successful box office runs for an independent film in the 1990s. In the United States, Good Will Hunting surpassed Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, 1994, as Miramax's most successful theatrical release ever, a significant achievement given Pulp Fiction's cultural impact and commercial success. The film became the 7th highest-grossing film of 1997 domestically, competing against major studio releases with significantly larger budgets and marketing campaigns. The box office performance trajectory demonstrated remarkable consistency and staying power. After its limited opening weekend gross of $272,912 from 7 theaters, representing a per-theater average of approximately $38,987. The film expanded gradually based on strong audience response and critical reception. The wide release opening of $14,844,684 from 1,787 theaters indicated that the film had successfully transitioned from art house success to mainstream appeal. The film's ability to remain among the top 10 highest-grossing films for 13 consecutive weeks testified to its broad appeal and positive word of mouth. This longevity allowed Good Will Hunting to accumulate its impressive total gross through sustained audience interest rather than a massive opening weekend followed by steep drops, a pattern more typical of event films and franchises. The 23.8% increase in weekly grosses following the announcement of 9 Academy Award nominations demonstrated the commercial value of awards recognition. This post-nomination bump was exactly the result Miramax had sought when positioning the film as an awards contender, and it validated the studio's aggressive marketing campaign during awards season. Industry analysts and commentators recognize Good Will Hunting as an exemplary case of counter-programming. Released nearly simultaneously with James Cameron's Titanic, which would become one of the highest-grossing films of all time, Good Will Hunting offered audiences an intimate alternative to epic spectacle. Rather than being crushed by Titanic's dominance, Good Will Hunting carved out its own audience and thrived alongside the blockbuster, demonstrating that different types of films could coexist successfully in the theatrical marketplace. Director Curtis Hanson placed Good Will Hunting's commercial success in the context of a broader trend in 1997, the resurgence of character-driven narratives as commercially viable products. Alongside films like As Good as It Gets and The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting demonstrated that audiences were hungry for well-crafted stories about recognizable human experiences, not just special effects and action sequences. Industry insiders and experts had predicted that 1997 would be dominated by major studio productions with massive budgets and marketing campaigns. The unexpected commercial success of Good Will Hunting and other independent films balanced out the year and demonstrated the continued viability of independent studios' productions. This success reinforced the artistic and commercial strength of independent cinema that had been built throughout the 1990s, following breakout hits like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, The Crying Game, and Pulp Fiction. The film's commercial performance had significant implications for all involved. For Miramax and Harvey Weinstein, it represented validation of their distribution and marketing strategies, particularly their aggressive awards campaigning. For Robin Williams, the back-end participation deal meant that his total compensation far exceeded what he would have earned from a standard $20 million upfront fee. For Gus Van Sant, the success established him as a bankable director capable of delivering both critical acclaim and commercial returns. For Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, the box office performance year combined with their Academy Award winner launched major Hollywood careers that would span decades. The profit participations negotiated by Van Sant, 2.5% of adjusted gross, and Affleck and Damon, percentage of net profit, meant that all three benefited substantially from the film's commercial success. Given that the film grossed over $225 million worldwide, these back-end deals proved far more lucrative than standard work-for-hire arrangements would have been. The decision to pull the film from theaters after 33 weeks, despite its continued profitability, reflected Miramax's calculation that home video revenue would exceed the diminishing theatrical returns. While some fans and industry observers criticized this decision, particularly Harvey Weinstein's request for Robin Williams to renegotiate his deal to keep the film in theaters longer, it represented standard business practice in the transition from theatrical to home video distribution. International markets contributed approximately 38% of the film's total gross, demonstrating that the story's themes and emotional resonance transcended cultural boundaries. The character-driven drama connected with audiences worldwide, suggesting that intimate storytelling about universal human experiences could succeed globally, not just in the American market. The commercial success of Good Will Hunting had lasting implications for independent cinema. It demonstrated that carefully crafted character dramas could generate substantial profits, encouraging studios to invest in similar projects. The film proved that unknown actors could carry a film commercially if the material and execution were strong enough. It validated the decision to maintain creative control and shoot on location in Boston rather than accepting studio compromises that might have diluted the film's authenticity. Perhaps most significantly, the box office performance of Good Will Hunting helped shift industry perceptions about the commercial potential of prestige drama. While Hollywood has always produced some character-driven films, the industry's dominant focus tends toward action, spectacle, and franchise properties. Good Will Hunting's success provided concrete evidence that audiences would support intelligent, emotionally resonant drama, potentially influencing development decisions and greenlight processes for similar films in subsequent years. The financial achievement of Good Will Hunting remains impressive even decades later. In an era of inflated budgets and diminished theatrical returns for mid-budget films, the story of a $16 million film grossing over $225 million worldwide represents a level of return on investment rarely seen in contemporary cinema. This commercial success ensured that Good Will Hunting would be remembered not just as a critical darling and awards contender, but as a genuine commercial phenomenon that proved the enduring appeal of well-crafted character-driven storytelling. Critical response: Good Will Hunting received widespread critical acclaim upon its release, with reviewers praising the screenplay, performances, direction, and emotional authenticity. The film's critical reception played a crucial role in its commercial success and awards recognition, establishing it as one of the defining films of the 1990s. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a rating of 97% based on 70 reviews, with an average rating of 8 out of 10. This near-universal positive reception placed Good Will Hunting among the most critically acclaimed films of its year. The site's critical consensus captured the general assessment: it follows a predictable narrative arc, but Good Will Hunting adds enough quirks to the journey and is loaded with enough a powerful performance so that it remains an entertaining, emotionally rich drama. At Metacritic, which weights reviews differently based on publication prestige, the film achieved a score of 70 out of 100 based on 28 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. While this score was somewhat lower than the Rotten Tomatoes percentage, it still represented strong critical support and reflected the consensus that Good Will Hunting was a well-crafted, emotionally effective film. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the film 3 stars out of 4, offering a measured but ultimately positive assessment. Ebert acknowledged that the story was predictable and that the whole story really followed familiar patterns. However, he argued that this predictability didn't diminish the film's effectiveness, writing that it's the individual moments, not the payoff, that make it so effective. Ebert particularly praised Robin Williams' performance, calling it one of his best performances as Maguire, especially in a scene where he finally gets the kid to repeat, "It's not my fault." Ebert also noted the film's exploration of genius and emotional damage, writing, "It's also heartbreaking when genius won't recognize itself, and that's the most baffling problem of all in Good Will Hunting, the smart, involving story of a working-class kid from Boston." He appreciated that the film depicted Will Hunting as a genuinely brilliant person rather than a lovable curiosity or idiot savant, understanding that Will's reluctance to embrace his opportunities stemmed from old psychic wounds and class loyalty rather than simple stubbornness. Janet Maslin of the New York Times called the screenplay smart and touching and praised Gus Van Sant for directing with style, shrewdness and clarity. She complimented the production design and cinematography, noting how effortlessly the film moved viewers from classroom to dorm room to neighborhood bar within its relatively small setting. Maslin recognized the film's ability to create a sense of place and atmosphere despite its modest budget and limited scope. Quentin Curtis of the Daily Telegraph offered a positive review that highlighted Robin Williams' performance as bringing sharpness and tenderness to the film. He called it a crowd pleaser, with bags of charm to spare, while also noting, it doesn't bear thinking too much about its message. Curtis praised the writing, stating that Damon and Affleck's writing has real wit and vigor, and some depth, recognizing the young screenwriter's achievement in creating both entertaining and emotionally resonant material. Not all reviews were entirely enthusiastic. Andrew O'Heher of Salon offered a more critical perspective, acknowledging the enjoyable characters but finding the film somewhat superficial. He wrote, "There isn't a whole lot of movie to take home with you. Many will wake the next morning wondering why, with all that talent on hand, it amounts to so little in the end." This minority critical position suggested that some reviewers found the film's emotional impact more immediate than lasting, questioning whether its accessible approach to complex psychological issues sacrificed depth for accessibility. Despite such reservations, the overwhelming critical consensus recognized Good Will Hunting as a well-crafted, emotionally effective drama. Critics particularly praised several specific elements. The performances received nearly unanimous acclaim. Robin Williams' portrayal of Sean Maguire was widely recognized as one of his finest dramatic performances, balancing humor and pain while bringing wisdom and vulnerability to the character. Matt Damon's lead performance as Will Hunting impressed critics with its combination of cockiness and vulnerability, intellectual confidence and emotional damage. The supporting cast, including Ben Affleck, Minnie Driver, and Stellan Skarsgård, all received positive notices for creating believable, multi-dimensional characters. The screenplay by Affleck and Damon garnered extensive praise for its sharp dialogue, authentic character voices, and emotional honesty. Critics recognized the achievement of creating a story that felt both specific to its Boston working-class setting and universal in its themes of trauma, healing, and self-acceptance. The script's balance of humor and drama, its avoidance of sentimentality while still being emotionally affecting, and its creation of memorable, quotable dialogue all contributed to positive assessments. Gus Van Sant's direction received credit for allowing the strong material and performances to shine without unnecessary stylistic flourishes. Critics appreciated Van Sant's understated approach, which emphasized character and emotion rather than calling attention to directorial technique. His ability to create intimate, emotionally honest scenes while maintaining narrative momentum earned widespread recognition. The film's authentic depiction of Boston, particularly working-class South Boston culture, received praise from critics familiar with the region. Reviewers noted that the accents, attitudes, clothing, and settings all felt genuine rather than stereotypical or caricatured. This authenticity contributed to the film's emotional credibility and helped distinguish it from other working-class dramas that might rely on cliché copyright-s or romanticization. Several critics recognize Good Will Hunting as a significant achievement for independent cinema, demonstrating that character-driven drama could compete critically and commercially with big-budget studio productions. The film's success reinforced the artistic legitimacy and commercial viability of independent filmmaking in the late 1990s. The critical reception had practical implications beyond mere reviews. Positive notices from influential critics like Roger Ebert and publications like The New York Times helped build awareness and attract audiences during the film's limited and wide releases. The strong critical consensus contributed to the film's word-of-mouth success and supported Miramax's awards campaign. During awards season, the critical support translated into numerous nominations and wins from critics' organizations. The film received recognition from the Critics' Choice Awards, various regional critics associations, and other groups that influence Academy Award voting. This critical institutional support helped position the film for its eventual 9 Oscar nominations. The critical response to Good Will Hunting has remained largely consistent over time. While some contemporary assessments have noted the film's conventional structure and feel-good elements, most retrospective evaluations recognize it as a well-crafted example of character-driven drama that succeeds through the quality of its execution rather than groundbreaking innovation. The film is generally regarded as one of the defining films of the 1990s, a period that saw independent cinema achieve unprecedented commercial and critical success. Critics have also noted the film's cultural impact, particularly its role in launching the careers of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and in bringing Elliott Smith's music to a wider audience. The film's exploration of class, genius, and trauma has made it a reference point in discussions of these themes in cinema, while specific scenes like the park bench conversation between Will and Sean have become iconic moments in film history. The near-universal critical acclaim for Good Will Hunting established it as a modern classic of American cinema. The positive reviews supported the film's commercial success, awards recognition, and lasting cultural influence, ensuring that it would be remembered as more than just a successful indie film but as a genuinely accomplished work of popular art that connected with both critics and audiences on a profound emotional level. Minnie Driver may have shined in the 1997 film Good Will Hunting, but on Wednesday's Watch What Happens, Live, the actress told Andy Cohen that she almost didn't get the role because a producer thought she wasn't hot enough. Driver was asked what the rudest thing anyone in the industry had ever said to her, without naming names. The producer did not think I was hot enough to be in that film and did not want me in the film, Driver said. The actress, who now stars in the ABC sitcom Speechless, then went on to credit Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, as well as director Gus Van Sant, who advocated for her casting. She went on to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. A broken bar. I really owe Matt Damon and Ben Affleck a broken bar. They fought very hard for me to play that role and I am grateful to them to this day, Driver said. Driver said the comments didn't really bother her because a hotness is a perception, and it's really a point of view, and this dude was no picnic to look at. While on the show, Driver also discussed her experience as victim of sexual abuse as a teenager, and how the stigma affects all women. Her comments were initially prompted in response to Donald Trump's objectifying comments towards women. It's important to talk about it. Now has never been a better time to speak up and for young women to feel like they have a voice, Driver said. Nobody gets to grab you by anything unless you want them to. A towering performance by Matt Damon in the lead, and a superlative ensemble headed by a terrific Robin Williams, elevate Good Will Hunting. Gus Van Sant's emotionally involving psychological drama, a notch or two above the mainstream therapeutic sensibility of its story. Centering on a brilliant working-class youngster who's forced to come to terms with his creative genius and true feelings, this beautifully realized tale is always engaging and often quite touching. With the right marketing, Miramax could score big with an extremely enjoyable picture whose old-fashioned virtues should play well in big cities as well as in middle American shopping malls. Fans of Van Sant's earlier, offbeat films may be disappointed by the more conventional attributes of Good Will Hunting, a problem drama dealing with the complex relationship between a rough, extraordinarily gifted kid and his equally troubled and bruised therapist. Thematically, film recalls Robert Redford's Ordinary People and especially Jodie Foster's Little Man Tate, which also revolved around a child genius of the working class. Nonetheless, it's a testament to Van Sant's idiosyncratic talent that he endows the narrative, particularly its first chapters, with the nihilistic humor and deceptively casual style that have marked his best work. Drugstore Cowboy and the more eccentric My Own Private Idaho, co-written by Damon and Ben Affleck, who have known each other since childhood in Boston. Protagonist is Will Hunting. Damon, a 20-year-old lad who works as a janitor at MIT and spends most of his time with his course friends at the neighborhood bar. Blessed with a certain genius, Will, who has never attended college, can summon obscure historical references based on his exceptional photographic memory. He can also solve difficult mathematical problems with an ease that makes MIT's richer and more educated students envious of him. When big shot Professor Lamb, breaking the waves Stellan Skarsgård, presents a math challenge to his students, with a fine reward to match, Will anonymously solves the formula on a blackboard placed in the school's corridor. Lamb begins a search for the mysterious student, and upon finding Will takes him under his wing. It's the only way for Will to get parole after a number of run-ins with the law. Lamb makes two conditions: that Will meet with him once a week for a math session and that he begin therapy. A succession of psychologists tries to reach Will, using various techniques, including hypnosis, but he won't cooperate. Finally, Lamb summons his old, alienated classmate, Sean McGuire Williams, a community college instructor and therapist, and the real drama begins. In essence, script is structured as a battle of wills, with four individuals vying for Will's soul: a mathematician, a therapist, an affluent British student named Skylar, Minnie Driver, who has a crush on him, and his buddy, Chucky, a fleck. Most of the narrative consists of intense one-on-one sessions between Will and Sean, two equally stubborn, equally wounded men. True to form, psychological revelations and emotional disclosures are made about their respective pasts. An orphan who was later abused by his surrogate father, Will has carried a chip on his shoulder since boyhood. A widower still in love with his wife, who died painfully of cancer, Sean is also a tough Irishman and product of an abusive parent. These kinds of parallels are, in fact, the major weakness of the script, which grows progressively schematic. By film's end, every personal problem and turbulent social interaction is neatly resolved. Helmer Van Sant must have realized that the tale is quite predictable, for he imbues the film with his customary devious style, employing visuals that are both grainy and arty, and leisurely pacing that offers emotional payoffs. As evidenced in his films, Van Sant is one of the few directors who truly understands and doesn't condescend to a blue-collar America. Addressing his favorite topic, outcasts, here he delves deeply into his half-dozen characters, and the result is a beautifully textured movie about the kinds of individuals seldom seen in mainstream Hollywood fare. Rich in tone, Good Will Hunting is funny, nonchalant, moving and angry, effortlessly alternating its various moods, often within the same scene. Endowed with good looks, he resembles Leonardo DiCaprio, and acting skills to match. Damon gives a charismatic performance in a demanding role that's bound to catapult him to stardom. Perfectly cast, he makes the aching, step-by-step transformation of Will realistic and credible. Comparisons will be made between Williams' Oscar-nominated role in Awakenings, in which he played a shy doctor, and his work here, which is quieter, subtler and far more satisfying. Rest of the cast is uniformly good, with standout work from Driver as the girl who changes Will's life. After a couple of disappointing assignments, Grace of My Heart, Gummo, cult French lenser Jean-Yves Coyer finally gets to show his brilliant, lyrical style in an American project. opting for natural light when possible and using South Boston as an integral character in the yarn. Longtime Van Sant collaborators Melissa Stewart and Beatrix Arana Stewart also make significant contributions with, respectively, their detailed production design and nuanced costumes, which effectively illustrate the coexistence of disparate social classes in America. The film's ability to remain among the top 10 highest-grossing films for 13 consecutive weeks testified to its broad appeal and positive word of mouth. This longevity allowed Good Will Hunting to accumulate its impressive total gross through sustained audience interest rather than a massive opening weekend followed by steep drops, a pattern more typical of event films and franchises. The 23.8% increase in weekly grosses following the announcement of 9 Academy Award nominations demonstrated the commercial value of awards recognition. This post-nomination bump was exactly the result Miramax had sought when positioning the film as an awards contender, and it validated the studio's aggressive marketing campaign during awards season. Industry analysts and commentators recognize Good Will Hunting as an exemplary case of counter-programming. Released nearly simultaneously with James Cameron's Titanic, which would become one of the highest-grossing films of all time, Good Will Hunting offered audiences an intimate alternative to epic spectacle. Rather than being crushed by Titanic's dominance, Good Will Hunting carved out its own audience and thrived alongside the blockbuster, demonstrating that different types of films could coexist successfully in the theatrical marketplace. Director Curtis Hanson placed Good Will Hunting's commercial success in the context of a broader trend in 1997, the resurgence of character-driven narratives as commercially viable products. Alongside films like As Good as It Gets and The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting demonstrated that audiences were hungry for well-crafted stories about recognizable human experiences, not just special effects and action sequences. Industry insiders and experts had predicted that 1997 would be dominated by major studio productions with massive budgets and marketing campaigns. The unexpected commercial success of Good Will Hunting and other independent films balanced out the year and demonstrated the continued viability of independent studios' productions. This success reinforced the artistic and commercial strength of independent cinema that had been built throughout the 1990s, following breakout hits like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, The Crying Game, and Pulp Fiction. The film's commercial performance had significant implications for all involved. For Miramax and Harvey Weinstein, it represented validation of their distribution and marketing strategies, particularly their aggressive awards campaigning. For Robin Williams, the back-end participation deal meant that his total compensation far exceeded what he would have earned from a standard $20 million upfront fee. For Gus Van Sant, the success established him as a bankable director capable of delivering both critical acclaim and commercial returns. For Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, the box office performance here combined with their Academy Award winner launched major Hollywood careers that would span decades. The profit participations negotiated by Van Sant, 2.5% of adjusted gross, and Affleck and Damon, percentage of net profit, meant that all three benefited substantially from the film's commercial success. Given that the film grossed over $225 million worldwide, these back-end deals proved far more lucrative than standard work-for-hire arrangements would have been. The decision to pull the film from theaters after 33 weeks, despite its continued profitability, reflected Miramax's calculation that home video revenue would exceed the diminishing theatrical returns. While some fans and industry observers criticized this decision, particularly Harvey Weinstein's request for Robin Williams to renegotiate his deal to keep the film in theaters longer, it represented standard business practice in the transition from theatrical to home video distribution. International markets contributed approximately 38% of the film's total gross, demonstrating that the story's themes and emotional resonance transcended cultural boundaries. The character-driven drama connected with audiences worldwide, suggesting that intimate storytelling about universal human experiences could succeed globally. not just in the American market. The commercial success of Good Will Hunting had lasting implications for independent cinema. It demonstrated that carefully crafted character dramas could generate substantial profits, encouraging studios to invest in similar projects. The film proved that unknown actors could carry a film commercially if the material and execution were strong enough. It validated the decision to maintain creative control and shoot on location in Boston rather than accepting studio compromises that might have diluted the film's authenticity. Perhaps most significantly, the box office performance of Good Will Hunting helped shift industry perceptions about the commercial potential of prestige drama. While Hollywood has always produced some character-driven films, the industry's dominant focus tends toward action, spectacle, and franchise properties. Good Will Hunting's success provided concrete evidence that audiences would support intelligent, emotionally resonant drama, potentially influencing development decisions and green-light processes for similar films in subsequent years. The financial achievement of Good Will Hunting remains impressive even decades later. In an era of inflated budgets and diminished theatrical returns for mid-budget films, the story of a $10-16 million film grossing over $225 million worldwide represents a level of return on investment rarely seen in contemporary cinema. This commercial success ensured that Good Will Hunting would be remembered not just as a critical darling and awards contender, but as a genuine commercial phenomenon that proved the enduring appeal of well-crafted character-driven storytelling. Critical response: Good Will Hunting received widespread critical acclaim upon its release, with reviewers praising the screenplay, performances, direction, and emotional authenticity. The film's critical reception played a crucial role in its commercial success and awards recognition, establishing it as one of the defining films of the 1990s. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a rating of 97% based on 70 reviews, with an average rating of 8 out of 10. This near-universal positive reception placed Good Will Hunting among the most critically acclaimed films of its year. The site's critical consensus captured the general assessment: it follows a predictable narrative arc, but Good Will Hunting adds enough quirks to the journey and is loaded with enough a powerful performance so that it remains an entertaining, emotionally rich drama. At Metacritic, which weights reviews differently based on publication prestige, the film achieved a score of 70 out of 100 based on 28 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. While this score was somewhat lower than the Rotten Tomatoes percentage, it still represented strong critical support and reflected the consensus that Good Will Hunting was a well-crafted, emotionally effective film. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the film 3 stars out of 4. Offering a measured but ultimately positive assessment. Ebert acknowledged that the story was predictable and that the whole story really followed familiar patterns. However, he argued that this predictability didn't diminish the film's effectiveness, writing that it's the individual moments, not the payoff, that make it so effective. Ebert particularly praised Robin Williams' performance, calling it one of his best performances as Maguire, especially in a scene where he finally gets the kid to repeat, "It's not my fault." Ebert also noted the film's exploration of genius and emotional damage, writing, "It's also heartbreaking when genius won't recognize itself, and that's the most baffling problem of all in Good Will Hunting, the smart, involving story of a working-class kid from Boston." He appreciated that the film depicted Will Hunting as a genuinely brilliant person rather than a lovable curiosity or idiot savant, understanding that Will's reluctance to embrace his opportunities stemmed from old psychic wounds and class loyalty rather than simple stubbornness. Janet Maslin of the New York Times called the screenplay smart and touching and praised Gus Van Sant for directing with style, shrewdness and clarity. She complimented the production design and cinematography, noting how effortlessly the film moved viewers from classroom to dorm room to neighborhood bar within its relatively small setting. Maslin recognized the film's ability to create a sense of place and atmosphere despite its modest budget and limited scope. Quentin Curtis of the Daily Telegraph offered a positive review that highlighted Robin Williams' performance as bringing sharpness and tenderness to the film. He called it a crowd pleaser, with bags of charm to spare, while also noting, it doesn't bear thinking too much about its message. Curtis praised the writing, stating that Damon and Affleck's writing has real wit and vigor, and some depth, recognizing the young screenwriter's achievement in creating both entertaining and emotionally resonant material. Not all reviews were entirely enthusiastic. Andrew O'Hehir of Salon offered a more critical perspective, acknowledging the enjoyable characters but finding the film somewhat superficial. He wrote, "There isn't a whole lot of movie to take home with you. Many will wake the next morning wondering why, with all that talent on hand, it amounts to so little in the end." This minority critical position suggested that some reviewers found the film's emotional impact more immediate than lasting, questioning whether its accessible approach to complex psychological issues sacrificed depth for accessibility. Despite such reservations, the overwhelming critical consensus recognized Good Will Hunting as a well-crafted, emotionally effective drama. Critics particularly praised several specific elements. The performances received nearly unanimous acclaim. Robin Williams' portrayal of Sean Maguire was widely recognized as one of his finest dramatic performances, balancing humor and pain while bringing wisdom and vulnerability to the character. Matt Damon's lead performance as Will Hunting impressed critics with its combination of cockiness and vulnerability, intellectual confidence and emotional damage. The supporting cast, including Ben Affleck, Minnie Driver, and Stellan Skarsgård, all received positive notices for creating believable, multi-dimensional characters. The screenplay by Affleck and Damon garnered extensive praise for its sharp dialogue, authentic character voices, and emotional honesty. Critics recognized the achievement of creating a story that felt both specific to its Boston working-class setting and universal in its themes of trauma, healing, and self-acceptance. The script's balance of humor and drama, its avoidance of sentimentality while still being emotionally affecting, and its creation of memorable, quotable dialogue all contributed to positive assessments. Gus Van Sant's direction received credit for allowing the strong material and performances to shine without unnecessary stylistic flourishes. Critics appreciated Van Sant's understated approach, which emphasized character and emotion rather than calling attention to directorial technique. His ability to create intimate, emotionally honest scenes while maintaining narrative momentum earned widespread recognition. The film's authentic depiction of Boston, particularly working-class South Boston culture, received praise from critics familiar with the region. Reviewers noted that the accents, attitudes, clothing, and settings all felt genuine rather than stereotypical or caricatured. This authenticity contributed to the film's emotional credibility and helped distinguish it from other working-class dramas that might rely on cliché copyright-s or romanticization. Several critics recognize Good Will Hunting as a significant achievement for independent cinema, demonstrating that character-driven drama could compete critically and commercially with big-budget studio productions. The film's success reinforced the artistic legitimacy and commercial viability of independent filmmaking in the late 1990s. The critical reception had practical implications beyond mere reviews. Positive notices from influential critics like Roger Ebert and publications like the New York Times helped build awareness and attract audiences during the film's limited and wide releases. The strong critical consensus contributed to the film's word-of-mouth success and supported Miramax's awards campaign. During awards season, the critical support translated into numerous nominations and wins from critics' organizations. The film received recognition from the Critics' Choice Awards, various regional critics associations, and other groups that influence Academy Award voting. This critical institutional support helped position the film for its eventual 9 Oscar nominations. The critical response to Good Will Hunting has remained largely consistent over time. While some contemporary assessments have noted the film's conventional structure and feel-good elements, most retrospective evaluations recognize it as a well-crafted example of character-driven drama that succeeds through the quality of its execution rather than groundbreaking innovation. The film is generally regarded as one of the defining films of the 1990s, a period that saw independent cinema achieve unprecedented commercial and critical success. Critics have also noted the film's cultural impact, particularly its role in launching the careers of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and in bringing Elliott Smith's music to a wider audience. The film's exploration of class, genius, and trauma has made it a reference point in discussions of these themes in cinema, while specific scenes like the park bench conversation between Will and Sean have become iconic moments in film history. The near-universal critical acclaim for Good Will Hunting established it as a modern classic of American cinema. The positive reviews supported the film's commercial success, awards recognition, and lasting cultural influence, ensuring that it would be remembered as more than just a successful indie film but as a genuinely accomplished work of popular art that connected with both critics and audiences on a profound emotional level. Minnie Driver may have shined in the 1997 film Good Will Hunting, but on Wednesday's Watch What Happens, Live, the actress told Andy Cohen that she almost didn't get the role because a producer thought she wasn't hot enough. Driver was asked what the rudest thing anyone in the industry had ever said to her, without naming names. The producer did not think I was hot enough to be in that film and did not want me in the film, Driver said. The actress, who now stars in the ABC sitcom Speechless, then went on to credit Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, as well as director Gus Van Sant, who advocated for her casting. She went on to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. A broken bar. I really owe Matt Damon and Ben Affleck a broken bar. They fought very hard for me to play that role and I am grateful to them to this day, Driver said. Driver said the comments didn't really bother her because a hotness is a perception, and it's really a point of view, and this dude was no picnic to look at.